All right. Good evening, everybody, and good night for those of you not on the West Coast time. My name is Nate. This may be the first time some of you have seen me on the screen other than in some videos. And I'm joined tonight with Jordan from North, and he's going to introduce himself here in just a moment. But I think you all have been in this Canvas system before, but just for the record and for housekeeping, you can chat those questions in. Jordan has said that he's happy to take questions throughout his presentation, so don't hesitate if you have a question come up while he's talking. And we're on for an hour, so we're going to be here until about 6:45. So without any further ado, Jordan, thanks for coming in.
Great, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to tell you a little bit about me and North and my professional experiences with beer, as opposed to my personal experiences with beer. And like Nate said, I'm happy to keep this as informal as you'd like. So I've got a couple of things prepared, a little bit about me and the agency I work at, some of the work we do, and then some examples of some of the work we've done for Deschutes Brewery, which is an Oregon-based brewery and sort of one of the earlier movers in the West Coast craft beer movement, who we used to work with and parted ways amicably with a couple of years ago, but we probably have the biggest body of produced work with them to share. We're now working with Anchor Brewing Company, but it's a newer relationship. So anything I would describe today would be confidential as it's not in the market yet. So hopefully a year from now we'll have a great Anchor case study to be talking about. If we just go through the PDF, do you drive? Cool. Look at that. Oh, perfect. So like I said, we're getting North. We are a Portland, Oregon advertising agency. We work with a range of clients. I'll get into some of that detail. And my name is Jordan Delapoer. I'm the Director of Brand Strategy at North. I've been in the advertising agency business for a little over 10 years now. Always been agency side, never gone to the client side. I've worked with a range of clients. I started my career at North before it was North. It was a smaller agency called Johnson Sheen, and worked with a handful of regional and national clients. Brooks Running Shoes is a logo up here as a brand I worked on years ago, and Gerber Knives and Tools is a fairly well-known Pacific Northwest kind of outdoor brand. After a few years at what was then Johnson Sheen, I went to Wieden & Kennedy, which you might be familiar with. It is a Portland-based but global ad agency. I think it's now the largest independently owned agency in the world, and there's a big asterisk there because all of the big agencies are not independently owned. So it's, I think, maybe the only independently owned global agency in the world. But Portland is home base. You might know they've done fairly well-known work for brands like Nike, Coca-Cola, Old Spice. And while I was there, I worked for a number of years on the EA Games business, launching a lot of different games. Yes, Super Bowl ads. Why does their share of Super Bowl ads? So I worked on EA Games for quite a while, then I switched over to EA Sports, managed the EA Sports business, did sort of business management strategy for them, launched pretty much all of their sports titles globally, and then after a couple of years of that, switched over to Target, which was a really interesting experience. And I worked on Target for a handful of years and in various capacities, a lot of different campaigns, but I did a lot of work with them on social media strategy, and then I spent a couple of years almost exclusively either managing or doing business and brand strategy for all of their Black Friday business, which I'm proud of the work. I'm not entirely proud of my contribution to Black Friday culture. And their holiday business, which is those last 6 weeks of the year for them are their biggest 6 weeks. So it was an interesting learning experience with a bit of intensity.
That was when it was still Black Friday, not Black Thursday,
right? Right. Well, interestingly, then it was Target called it the 2-day campaign, but it was Friday and Saturday. It hadn't occurred to anybody yet to split it up. Their whole big thing was we'll give you an extra day of sale. Gotcha. Yeah, so my caveat is that I worked on it before it ruined anybody's Thanksgiving. It just ruined people's sleep the night after Thanksgiving. Yeah, and then the holiday business, which was a really interesting crash course in retail marketing. The retail business is an interesting world, and things for Target are fairly fast-paced, and there's a lot of money on the line for them. So it was good. It was a great experience. Sorry, I'm getting all kinds of notifications on my computer. There we go. And then about 3.5 years ago, I chose to leave Wieden and go back to my roots to North. My like I said, North was previously called Johnson Sheen, which is where I started, and I went back there in sort of an expanded capacity. We're a smaller agency, and I kind of missed doing strategy. The thing is, when you go to a big agency and you're a strategy person, it's rare that you're doing strategy for an entire organization or entire brand. You know, the Nike business is too big for one person to run strategy on. So you end up focused on really specific things, as I was with Target, which was fascinating for a time, but I was looking to get back into having a broader point of view and being more, I guess, in a more collaborative role with clients and helping them figure out how to solve business problems. So I'm the director of strategy at North, and essentially, should I describe that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Strategy, agencies call all kinds of different things. It's usually called planner, strategic planner, strategist, but I think of myself essentially as an interpreter. So I work very, very closely with the client to understand their business, the context around their business, the consumer, the marketplace, really any kind of input from outside and from inside that would be affecting sales or awareness or equity or things like that. And then I work with them to understand their business problem, and I try and take my knowledge of their category, what's going on in culture, and then I collaborate very closely with the creative team to try and help translate the business problem into kind of a strategic solution that will then inspire the creative team to ultimately develop advertising and marketing that we hope will solve the business problem. So I live kind of in the middle between creativity and business strategy, which is a role that seems to never get easier, but it's really interesting and fun. I would think after all this time I'd start to have it figured out, but every problem is different and it seems like equally confounding. So that's the snapshot of me. If there's no questions there, I'll briefly talk about, let's see, just click anywhere? No, I'll click here. North. We were originally founded in 91, and like I said, rebranded as North in 2006. I left in 2007, independently owned agency. We are located at our one and only world headquarters here in Portland. We're about a $25 million company in terms of billings, $5 million revenue. 30 employees is a little bit dated. I think we're pushing 35 now. So certainly boutique. We don't have any magic number on what the right size is, but not trying to grow for the sake of it, trying to do interesting work with interesting clients, and if they want to pay us to hire more people, then we'll go ahead and do it.
How does that compare in size to other agencies folks might work with at some point? Is that a big one, pretty small?
It's small. I would definitely call it boutique. Okay. It's small. It's not entirely small for the Portland market, but there are all range of agencies. So if you're working in a big market like LA or New York, you could very easily find a 5-person strategic and creative design shop all the way up to you go to Chiat Day and be working with, I don't know what they are now, 1,200 people. So I tend to prefer the 500 and smaller style. I think you wear more hats, you get to try out more things. You end up, I think, sometimes being more collaborative with clients, getting to know the clients a little bit better. But yeah, I would definitely say North is boutique. And in the case of Portland, there are a handful of 10 and 20 and 30-person agencies, a couple of 40, 50, one or two 100-person agencies, and then there's Wyden, which is probably hanging around 600 people in Portland and, I don't know, 2,000 globally. Okay. So a whole range. But it's interesting. I think that the agency model has changed so much that the size of the agency, this is sort of a plug, I guess, wasn't intended to be, but the size of the agency means less because there's so much ubiquity of access to technology. Once was a time that only a big agency had the resources to do big things, and now because anybody can access any kind of tool, any kind of software, any kind of hardware, and there's just an incredible world of freelance partners out there. I've learned that you can be a fairly small agency and partner with the right people and use the right technologies and do big-ish things. So that's been a nice sort of sweet spot for us lately. And that kind of goes into this capabilities list. For a small agency, it might look like a long-ish list of capabilities, and that is because we do partner, right? So we don't consider ourselves a specialist agency. We're not a digital agency or a social agency or an event marketing agency. We try to be, as much as possible, a general strategic partner and lead creative agency. And so what that means is clients rarely ask us. We don't get the calls that are, we got a project we need to turn around in a month and a half. It's going to, 5 months from now, we're going to be done. Ours are usually, we're usually agency of record is what it's called. So clients will partner with us for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. We'll be their only agency or their lead agency, and really collaborate with them on solving business problems through creativity as opposed to one-off projects.
And so I was going to say, from the perspective of somebody just starting a business, they would come to you and say, hey, I need to, from day one, help me design a logo all the way up to 6-9 months when we launch. I want to have, a campaign that looks like this.
Yeah, they certainly could. Absolutely. I think, we end up working with a couple of different kinds of clients. One is sort of the more established kind of client that's been doing it for a while. They've worked for 5 or 6 agencies over the course of their history. They part ways with that agency for whatever reason, and now they're working with us. And then we work with a lot of clients who have grown their business to a point where they're kind of they're seeing growth taper. Yeah. And they're realizing that they're probably not going to grow at the pace they want to grow organically without doing something to boost some demand creation, to get people interested, to get their name out there in a broader sense. And so we have a lot of clients, and those are frankly some of my favorites because it's, we know the problems, we know the opportunities, we know the product, we know the founding story, but we don't know what the brand could be. It's, it's wide open. There's a lot of potential for storytelling, which is a lot of fun on the agency side. And so I love when brands come to us. Some come to us saying we're a startup and we have this idea and here's this product and we like it, it's cool, so we'll do it for little or no money or in trade just because it sounds like fun. And a lot of clients will come to us and say, we've grown to this point, help us figure out how to grow further. But it's always, the best collaborations, the best relationships, and I think the best work ultimately, both for the agencies, sort of real, but also for driving the client's business is when a client comes and says, this is the problem. We have some ideas on what are causing the problem, or these are our goals, or this is our opportunity, as opposed to when they come and say, we need you to make X, and I need to do this, and it needs to look like this. And it's not because that's wrong. They at that point, the thing that the client wants us to make could very well be the right thing. Certainly they're more informed about their business than we are, but I think that the process of understanding and deconstructing the problem, even if it leads you to the conclusion that you started with, helps you better understand the business and sets you up for success longer term. So and I'm biased because I'm a strategist. I like to solve problems. My job is to try to solve problems or at least understand a problem. So I always think the best work and the longest sort of running client agency collaborations come out of mutual desire to solve a problem or sort of fulfill an opportunity as opposed to a specific directive of make this thing that looks like this. I have a question. When you team up with a customer that contracts for a certain amount of time or money, or is it based on workload jobs? One of the every agency's, sorry, is everyone able to read the question?
You got it, yeah.
Okay, so this is around contracts and compensation. Every agency's model is different, and to be honest with you, being a smaller independent agency, we're pretty flexible, so we end up doing whatever is going to be equitable for both parties. So we have some clients that are on yearly retainer models, and retainers really only work for anybody when you have a really clear vision at the outset for what the scope is going to be. We're going to do this many things, it's going to take us roughly this many hours, therefore you're going to pay us this. We have a lot of clients that are on a hybrid time retainer model. So we'll do retainer for me, for strategic management, for brand management, account management, project management, the basic sort of business management side of things. But because it's a new relationship, we don't know what we're going to make yet. We don't know if it's going to be a TV spot, a website, or a bunch of social media posts. We can't plan to build that up front. So we'll do estimates by job throughout the year. So that way they get somebody thinking about their business all the time. The client gets somebody thinking about their business all the time, but they aren't being billed for things they aren't making. And then we have a handful of clients that are time and materials. It's like, hey, can you help us with this thing? We don't know what the long term is, but we're excited. And if we, I would say that's an investment for it. We try and keep on balance, clients that are profitable and clients that are investments because we think it's an interesting creative project, or really, we tend to say it's got to be some combination of good product, good money, and good people. And you got to have 2 of the 3. If you have 1 of the 3, you can do it, but it's harder. 3 of the 3 is really nice, but it's rare.
Good question. Does that answer your question, Ryan? Yeah. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah. So anyway, North, we're a full service agency. The services that we don't have in-house because we're a small shop, we partner really well. And like I said, that's sort of the ubiquitous technology anymore. So one of the things we do is we're built to bring people in. So we don't have on-staff editors, for example, but we have edit base. We don't have on-staff musicians per se, although we employ a lot of musicians, but we have a built-in studio. So sometimes it makes more sense for us to bring somebody in to work on our space for a month, a week, a year at times. And that's sort of how we scale up and scale down. With core strategic leadership, business leadership, creative leadership team of roughly 35 of us are always there, and then we sort of ebb and flow with freelancing contract. We call them North Friends. They're sort of permalance. They have a company email. We can call them, and then 3 hours they're sitting at a desk, and they may be sitting there for 9 to 5 for the next 6 months. So that's how we sort of manage different size budgets, but always wanting to try and do the best work we can regardless of what the budget. Yeah, exactly. Interesting stuff. So overview of North. How does strategic marketing change when a business doesn't have the ability to expand out of certain geographical zones specifically, especially on a web app? Does strategic marketing change when a business doesn't have the ability? Well, I'll start talking about that, and you tell me if I'm not answering the question, because I might not be understanding it. But I think around strategic marketing in a specific territory or specific region, sometimes that's my favorite work to do, because when the brand can be referential of its home place or where it lives, or part of the brand story can be tied to the community or the group of consumers that are there, I think sometimes that leads to the most interesting creative work. I think it leads to stronger consumer relationships. So Anchor Brewing Company is a brand that we work with now. As you know, they're a nationally and slightly international brand, but they are a San Francisco brand for all intents and purposes. That's where they're from. That's where they're born. That's what they're famous for. It's all their heritages. And we will be marketing them nationally, but sometimes being able to focus on a home area is the most fun work. And I think that or can export its products, so the marketing has to adapt to culture geography. So I think creatively, sometimes that leads to really great opportunities. The hardest thing to do is to find, I think, the thing that is the truth about a brand or the creative idea that's going to be as universally appealing as possible without being so diluted that you're not saying anything. That's often the problem. We work on the Columbia Sportswear business, which is a $2 billion global brand. It's a phenomenal brand and a lot of fun to work on. But one of the challenges is having ideas that are going to be resonant globally that we know will be translating or transcreating, that all of the cultural insights won't hold. But having a strategic truth for the brand and creative ideas, they're going to be as relevant in China. China is a big market for them right now, as will be in North America or Canada, which are very mature markets and clearly culturally very different, is a tough challenge. So creatively and strategically, I think being able to focus on where you're from is a strength. And I think that's a particular strength actually in beer, because at least in the world of craft beer, so much of the story is about where you're from. And so, at least in the States, I don't know if Puerto Rico follows suit, but in the States, so much of the loyalty comes from that shop around the corner of that thing from my hometown. And anymore, there is a brewery, if not 10, in just about every major metro. And so it's one of the things we always talked about on Deschutes and Anchor is you can't be local everywhere. They can't be local everywhere. So be local somewhere and bring the essence of your home place to those markets with you. Now, on the sort of more marketing-centric side of that, it presents, I think, interesting challenges and opportunities in terms of reaching your audience. So, at least in the States, in the contiguous states, you wouldn't do a national TV buy for a regional brand. But anymore, that's not a big deal, because with the capabilities in digital, you can become so hyper targeted that you have very little waste. So if you know your geographic zone relatively well, tools, a lot of the digital buying tools, a lot of the digital partners, a lot of the digital buying networks, social media platforms that allow you to buy ad space will allow you to get super targeted not only to geography, but to interests, to behavior, to a level of creepy detail. So it allows you to be very efficient with your targeting. The truth is, the more targeted you get on a platform like Facebook, the more expensive it becomes to generate a click, to generate an impression, because you're paying for that level of targeting, those parameters. But I guess without getting into the details of all the platforms, I would say that digital is the key, at least in my mind, to being highly focused geographically and to being efficiently focused geographically. And like I said, I think it leads to interesting strategic creative opportunities for a brand's story. So Christian, I'll move on, and if that doesn't answer your question, then fire one in there.
And Christian, I'll add too, we talk a little bit next week about demographics and psychographics, which is what Jordan's talking about here, getting really into that fine detail about pinpointing who you want to talk to and then making sure that those folks, and only those folks, see that ad.
And I'll add another note about that, the demographics and psychographics. I think that's really important. One of, brand advertising versus direct versus super targeted. One of the things that we'll often do is identify our demographic target. So males 18 to 35, household income of X, education level of Y, marital status of Z, kids, white collar, blah, 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 major metros, that sort of thing. That tells you who you want your media to reach, but that doesn't identify a human. That doesn't identify a person. The best advertising speaks to emotion, right? How somebody sees themselves, somebody's worldview. So what we'll do from a media targeting perspective is really narrow down on the demographics, and with some of those tools like I was talking about earlier, you can get really tight into the behavioral data. People who snowboard 10 times a year or more and also drink craft beer and love rock and roll. Like, you can get that kind of behavioral data on people, which allows your media to be really efficiently targeted. But from a brand storytelling perspective, we don't really think much about demographics because, what 50-year-old doesn't think about when they were a 25-year-old and what 16-year-old doesn't think about when they're going to be 21, right? It's more about mindset. And so what we do when we're thinking about a brand story is not think about the demographics of who they want to reach, but the mindset of who they want to reach, and try and find as meaningful but as broad as possible, kind of, we call it the universal mindset. So it's really who that person is or how they want to see themselves is how we tell the story. What they do and the demographic data about exactly who they are is some sort of how we find them. Kind of like selling a lifestyle, exactly like that, absolutely. And I think, if you look at any great brand out there, they sell an idea to sell a product. There's a great, if any of you want to look up, there's an interesting sort of marketing brand thinker named Simon Sinek. It's S-I-N-E-K. He has a couple of books and a nice TED Talk and video on YouTube. But there's one called Start With Why. And I think it's really rudimentary, and I think it's, usually the best ideas are really simple, and I think this is 100% true. And his theory is essentially that that most brands, sure, I can step saying that most brands will start with, there it is. Most brands will start with what we make, what we offer, and they'll try and differentiate with the product. And some brands will get to the how we make it. Our processes, our approach to making that thing is differentiated. And his philosophy, and I would say my philosophy, and getting to that point of kind of like selling a lifestyle, is the brands that are really meaningful start with why. Why do I exist? Why do I want to be here? Why should I matter? Why should anyone care about what I have to say? And then they use that. They don't always talk about that why in their advertising, but they know it. And that why then informs, you feel it in everything that brand does. A brand that really clearly understands its core purpose is going to be, even if you don't mean to be as a marketer, you're going to be more focused, you're going to be more emotional, you're going to be clearer, you're going to give people stronger reasons to believe, you're going to feel differentiated. So use your why of a brand. Why did you get into this business? Why do you have passion? Why do you care? Why do you think somebody else should care? Why are you proud of what you're doing? And then allow that why to infuse your storytelling around the how I do it, the what I make. So a brand like Apple is maybe the best example of a brand that their products are works of art. They're beautiful, but I would say that the reason people buy, and actually Simon Sinek talks about Apple, the reason that people buy Apple is because they see it as a sort of an unlocker of their own creativity. That the reason Apple's done everything they've done is to spark sort of creative freedom in the masses and to bring beauty and creativity together. Nike may be a shoe company or an apparel company, but their why is all about human potential. It's about unlocking people's potential to do whatever it is they're built and prepared to do. And so that belief is infused in the story of how they make the product, the story of the athletes they partner with, the story of the advertising that they produce. So
yeah, I've got a link that I'll share next week with all y'all. That's interesting anecdotes about the proliferation of creation myths in business, and how not just creation myths, but creation myths that start in a garage.
Oh yeah, it's incredible.
How many businesses, especially tech companies and breweries, do you know? If you go to the About Us, it starts with back in 19 whatever, we started in a garage.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, and in some cases those have proven to be not wholly correct, but
Yeah.
people really want to latch on to a story that grounds
Absolutely.
them, and that's what it's
Absolutely.
about.
And I mean, I always love a good founder story because my philosophy on strategy and our agency's philosophy on creativity is that strategy in particular, brand strategy, it's not made up. I don't invent. I don't create a brand's strategy or story out of thin air. It's like archaeology. It's there. If it's not a truth that's already there, I don't want to tell that story because it's flimsy. And anymore, there's so much access to information, consumers are going to pick it apart, and you're going to get called out on it. And so from our perspective, you start with truths of a brand. It doesn't mean you can't take creative license. It doesn't mean you can't take some liberties. Maybe it started in a shed, not a garage. But start with the truths and the stories of the brand. And I think not only does that lead to better storytelling, it leads to richer storytelling that's going to last your brand a lot longer. It also doesn't lead to you having to do a reset because you tell the truth, and the truth is the truth. It's simpler that way. You can't take it back. And anymore, people. This is not a new saying, but people vote with their dollar. They don't just spend it, right? Like people, and especially younger generations, millennials, are known for being very happy to associate with brands. There isn't that sort of that philosophy of keeping a brand or a company at arm's length anymore. If that brand helps them as a badge, if it helps them show who they are, their beliefs. I carry an Apple mobile device versus a Samsung because I'm this kind of person, and so you don't get the I'm this kind of person relationship and branding without telling a deeper story, much, much beyond the product. And I think that goes back to that why. Why are we in business, and what is our purpose in the world?
That's still Simon's name, right?
You did. I think so. So client list. I'll just read this and then we can get to some of the shoot stuff. Fans for brands. This is, we wrote this because we believe it, but every RFP, meaning every request for proposal, every time a client comes to you saying, we're considering 6 agencies, you're one among them, what makes you different? Every time a client comes to us, you get that question, what makes you different? And it's, 99% of what agencies say is the same as what the other 99% of agencies say, right? It's hard to say something different anymore. I don't know if this is something different or not, but this goes into the why, and this goes to sort of into the idea that we want to build brands worth badging with, not just worth consuming. And so our fundamental belief as an agency, the thing we're always trying to do is create fans. It's not create consumers. It's not identify a strategic target. It's not, sell more units. It is all of those things, but all of those things happen because we're creating fans. They can happen without creating fans, but if you create fans, you're going to do all of those things better, longer, and ultimately with more loyalty. And so this is sort of our little mission statement. I'll just read it to you. Fans are the best customers. They try, buy, share, spread the word, carry the torch, keep you honest, and most importantly, stay loyal when you need them. They are optimal ROI for any brand. Thing is, you can try to buy their affection, but the only way to get it is to earn it. Brands used to be able to force themselves on customers. Now brands need to be invited. When making fans, it helps to think more like a musician than a marketer. So we approach our work with a unique blend of science and intuitive creativity from the mind and heart together. We work very, very hard to do our jobs honestly. We don't make stuff up or manipulate. We unearth the brand's most compelling truths and amplify them boldly and thoughtfully. In the new social, transparent world, the truth works best. It's that simple. So we've talked about that. And that we're actually rebuilding our website right now, and that copy will be up there in the next month or so. So that's the overview on North and me. And I'm happy to take questions on any of that. The other 1 or 2 things I have prepared, if we want to go through them, are examples of some of the work that we did for Deschutes Brewery. And I just figured I would walk through it and hit on the highlights quickly, and then jump in with questions, and leave time after for some Q&A as well.
Sounds perfect. Yeah.
So if you guys have internet, I'm going to load it. I have my laptop down here, but if you have web access, go to north.com. Sorry, 1 second. That's north.com. And then you should see a big box that says work. Click on the work button. North.com/work. Yep. So click on work, and then if you scroll down, why don't we go to, it's the second row, the box on the right with a picture of a mountain that says bravely done, which was, I don't know if it still is, the Deschutes Brewery tagline. So I'll give you just a minute Let me know if anyone's having problems, otherwise we'll jump into it. So I'll keep this cool. Pretty top line. I'll look at the work and then we can chat about it. So we tend to arrange all of our thinking in terms of problem, solution, results, or opportunity, solution, results. And this is a little bit dated now only because Deschutes has continued to have some kind of results, whether they're residual from when we worked together or not. I'm happy to claim them, but I don't know if I can in all honesty. So the problem, I don't know if it's a problem, but Deschutes, this goes back to sort of the regional question. Deschutes started as a Pacific Northwest brand. Their model has never been go get very low market share national distribution and be a national brand. Their model has instead been open markets, market by market, progressively in a way that makes sense, and grow the business geographically, spread it really from west to east across the states to build it. So they open up a state, 2 states, 3 states at a time as distributor relationships come online. So their challenge to us was, as they rolled out nationally, they wanted to, the world has changed in beer even since then, but they needed to sort of stand out and transcend the glut of competitors. Like I said before, they were local somewhere, but there was no way to be local everywhere. And local, especially at the rate that new breweries are coming online, is so much of the story, and it's a story that I wish I could tell more of, but our brands aren't local to, New York. So the job for us was to figure out how to make them stand apart nationally, even though they weren't a brand from that area. And fundamentally, they were named Deschutes, which is a word people don't understand. It's really difficult to pronounce, and if you do any looking into it, it is a, I won't say it's an Oregon word, it's a Native American word, most commonly referred or associated with a river in Central Oregon, the river that the brewery draws its water from. So Deschutes Brewery, it was confusing to people at the least. It doesn't resonate. And the other piece of it is I've yet to work with a craft beer brand that wants to look like a marketer, that wants to look like a slick advertising brand, and I don't blame them at all. In the world of beer, there's a real us and them mentality, right? There's the big boys, the AB and Dowds, the Miller Coors, and then there's kind of everybody else. And I know there's a lot of range in the everybody else, but there's definitely, I think, in the world of beer, there's this sort of the man, there's the big guys, and then there's the authentic, cool, interesting guys. It's sort of like the way the category tends to think of itself, and I think the way the consumer does as well. And so
everybody else isn't making Super Bowl ads, right?
Exactly, right. Yeah, and so for Deschutes, and this is true to an extent of Anchor, not making ads that look, sound, feel, smell just like ads was always the goal. So we couldn't, we had to employ many of the devices of advertising, but to try to make them feel as authentic or as interesting or as personal or as conversational as possible. So solution, and this is tapping into their sort of the truths of that business. Like I said earlier, we try not to make it up. So Deschutes, I don't know how familiar you are with them. They're I think in the world of craft beginning to be thought of as they've been at it longer.
Raise your hand if you have not heard of Deschutes. Let's say
maybe not as risk-taking a beer as they once were.
Yeah.
But as an early mover, they were kind of a risk-taker in the beer category, and they like to think of themselves as a risk-taker. And I think that in many ways the risks that they always took were not just throwing out another beer every month to sort of to satiate appetite for new, but instead to like really focus on the craft and create perfectly balanced, wonderful beers. And so this mantra of bravely done became the sort of internal and external rallying cry. That's something that they talked about when it came to the way. Excellent. It's a tasty beer. So bravely done became our line. And the sort of mentality became, if it's not brave, don't do it. So let's not act like a typical brewery. Let's not do advertising, at least in the big brand sort of way. So certainly we had some print ads, but more than that, it was social media and brand storytelling through film and things like that. So if you click to the right, this is a film. You see the little arrows on the right-hand side of the screen. This is a film called Landmarks. I'm going to skip. I think I'll skip this one. You guys can watch it on your own time. If you skip to the next ad, I'll tell the story of that. So this is one of those things where, again, it was like, well, we're local somewhere. There's no getting around it. Our name is a confusing name about a river that nobody's ever heard of. We can either push against it or we can just own it. And the other truth of Deschutes is that the way they've named all of their beers is about things in Central Oregon. Black Butte Porter is, Black Butte is 30 miles from the brewery. Twilight is about the sunset over Smith Rock, which is a beautiful natural rock formation near the brewery. Let's see.
Red Chair,
Mirror Pond,
yeah.
Obsidian. They're all about places there. And what's interesting is you could map the inspiration for all of the names of the beers on a map and not go more than about 60 miles. And so we said, let's tell that story. So we created that film, which you all can watch as you choose to, called Landmarks, which was just a nice little fictionalized piece of a couple kind of on a road trip traveling to experience all of the different places that the beers, sort of on a drinking journey. Driving very carefully, and then trying to tie that into the business side of the equation, we created this variety pack. Variety packs are still, I don't know, they're out there. They were a bigger thing, I think, about 5 years ago. So we created the Landmarks Variety Pack, which was a way of telling the full story, of giving context for why this beer is named what it is, for making it look, sound, and sort of feel different from what else was out there. And there was a business reason, which is Mirror Pond and Black Butte Porter are the core of their business. Their share, as a total dollar volume, much of their business is those two beers. And so we certainly didn't want to cut the heads off of those beers, but we also wanted to introduce the range of the portfolio to Black Butte and Mirror Pond fans on the off chance that they liked, Twilight or one of the others. And so this variety pack named after the home place became a way of doing that. So if you go to the next slide, the red impact is marketing. One or two short words or just a word like Deschutes. That's a great question. I don't know that I have a perfectly succinct answer for that. I mean, I think if you look at the range of brands that we all take for granted and don't think twice about consuming, there's some really strange names and they don't follow a convention. From Old Spice to Procter and Gamble to Shiner to Tesla has its own interesting story. Apple, how counterintuitive is that? I guess they are all short-ish. I think that you want your brand to stand out for something. And sometimes you choose the things that's going to stand out for, and sometimes your founding story sort of just causes that to happen, and sometimes consumers tend to pick it for you. I think you work with the assets you have. So in the case of Deschutes, we had it like it or not, and it was a problem if we didn't address it. So we decided instead of sweeping it under the rug and working around it, we would just try as best we could to make it an asset, to make it take on meaning. I think so. I don't know that there's a specific that I have a natural answer for that. I think that a brand like Tesla, the name makes perfect sense, right? It's an electric car company. Nikola Tesla has a particular history associated with the invention of the electric
the Tesla coil.
The Tesla coil. Yeah, exactly.
And I'm thinking about your question, Christian. I mean, other than maybe not being able to fit a long name on a bottle cap, I think.
Yeah. What about Leinenkugel though?
Yeah.
Leinenkugel.
But I think that
Boston Brewing Company.
You're just going to run into, you're still going to go back and tell that creation story.
Yeah.
And tie people back into why your name is what it is, whether it's a short name or a long name. You'll figure out how to make it work. Yeah.
You just, the worst thing you can do in the world of marketing is get in the way of your brand or of your alternating current. You don't want to put up roadblocks for people discovering, understanding, or appreciating your business or your brand. And so if you have a name that's super simple and intuitive but memorable, that's great. If you have a name that's got some concept built into it, I think that's great. But there are a lot of nonsense names out there. There was a really interesting article on how complicated it's gotten. I think I sent it to you. Yeah. How complicated it's gotten to name a beer anymore because everything landmark, geography, weather pattern, river, lake, and ocean is taken. So I think that you go with what you've got, and if you can tell a story around it, you do. And if it's getting in the way, you find a way to make it your story. And if it's not a big deal, then you build your brand out of other pieces of the other elements of the brand of the business. So let's see. Getting time. So we'll click through this quickly. So if you go, if you're on the flat slide, it says bravely done. Our beers are all over the map. How perfectly road trip. So this was some of the in-store marketing then that accompanied the release of the film and the variety pack entering markets. This became counter cards, bar posters, cooler flyers that started to tell that story, so trying to show an integrated story. If you click to the next slide, you'll see this has nothing to do with landmarks, but I think from a design, storytelling, look, tone perspective, feels really similar. So I think it's an example for us of, one brand can tell a lot of different stories over time, but going back to the sort of why and the core of who that brand is, as long as you know who you are, your stories will feel like they're coming from the same personality. So this is some, the Wild Wild West comes to the Midwest. This was some work we did, some wild posting work we did when they entered Chicago. Again, trying to, not trying to hide the fact that we weren't a Chicago brand. Chicago's a great beer town with a lot of craft breweries, and it felt like the only way anybody's going to care about us is if we make it interesting that we're this West Coast brand that they might not have heard of, and that there's something cool about the West Coast or the Wild West that's maybe worth checking out. Coming in and acting just like Goose Island or 10th and Blake, why would they pick us over? Slides are not supposed to be moving on your screen, but you should see little arrows on either side of the slide on north.com, or if you click the arrow on your keyboard, it should advance. So if it's not doing that, let me know. You can click through a couple more of the wild postings. Now I'm on the website. That was something that we did for them. We did a complete web overhaul for them, and I think this is getting back to that point about you don't want to be a roadblock to your own consumer. And at the agency, it's often the first thing you want to do is make a flashy, glitzy, fun, branded entertainment kind of website experience. But the truth is, that's what Facebook is for. That's what YouTube is for. People go to corporate websites for information, to get access to the product, to find out what's going to cost, where they can get it, to learn about the product. That wasn't the case 7 or 8 years ago, but I would say it very much is the case now. And so instead of creating a super flashy, video player website, we said, let's build a beer finder. Let's work with the distributor to get real-time sales information on exactly what beer is available, where and when, and make it geolocate you. And we made a mobile version of it and a desktop version. So the mobile version, you loaded it, and it knew where you were, and it knew what beer was around the corner, and you could search for beer. And that tool is still something they use. It was a major undertaking for them.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you. So, it looks and feels like Deschutes, but it wasn't a great storytelling opportunity. So we didn't. I think that modern marketing is very aware of the channel that's being conveyed, and the way you tell your story on your website should be different than on YouTube versus Facebook. It starts from the same truth, but leverage the strength of the channel. We're short on time. What I would suggest, unless you want to guide me differently, well, I'll tell you what. We'll pause for a second. If you have a bunch of questions, start firing them off. If you don't, we'll keep going through this. You can certainly look through this work. It's on our website, so you can continue to look through it on your own. And the other one I'd recommend you look at, is I think it's the work I'm most proud of, is if you go back out to our work section, there'll be a box called Deschutes River Recordings, which was, I think, a really interesting music collaboration we did. And I'll say the thing that I think was really interesting about that's important thinking about beer, is beer, all brands want to think they're the center of the universe, the center of a consumer's universe. You should. It's your business. It's your brand. Like, you love it like nobody else. And it's easy to think that everybody else should. And the truth is, a lot of brands, nobody's ever going to love them that much. Or if they do, it's not because you started with that assumption. And the thing that I think is always interesting about beer is beer pairs well with experiences, right? With occasions. And so one of the things we did for Deschutes when they wanted to do marketing that didn't feel like marketing, instead of going out and talking about the beers, we did a bunch of research and found that the percentage of craft beer drinkers who also listen to independent rock music is like 125% more likely than the national average. So we said, let's do independent music creative instead of beer creative, but it's the brand bringing it to you. So we partnered with Pitchfork.com, which is a leader in indie music, to do recreated cover songs of songs about rivers to allow free download, to ultimately benefit the Deschutes River Conservancy, which is the water from which the beer is made. So it was a sort of full circle innovative campaign, but it was a content campaign, and the content was music. It had nothing to do with beer. In fact, the beer almost never even shows up. There are very few of those, clever product placements of the beer sitting, next to the drum kit. There's a few of those. So check that out if you're interested. So questions? Does that seem fine in terms of format?
That's great. Yeah.
Okay. Did you look to other direct competitors to inspire your marketing strategy, either to mirror or to avoid? Who were they and what were they doing? That's interesting. I won't speak specifically to Deschutes because I can't remember all of that context because it was a while ago, but we're doing it now with Anchor, and I'm doing it constantly with a lot of other brands. I I'll answer that specifically and then go into detail. So do you look at direct competitors? Yes. Do we do it to inspire our marketing? No. I mean, I think we do it very much to differentiate from exactly what they're doing. So I guess in that sense, we're inspired to really work hard to try to do something different. And that can be really hard when there's when there's a super cluttered category, or when there's brands in the space that are leaders that are doing really wonderful work. It can be hard to find the thing that's about you that's different, and that's often where you go back to the founding story, to the founding principles, because invariably your early stories are different than somebody else's. So yes, to avoid them, not to mirror them. Who are they? What were they doing? There's an interesting story. I didn't work on Miller Genuine Draft, but one of my partners and our creative director worked for, I can't remember what brand owns it, but when MGD was on fire, one of the competitor brands started Michelob Golden Draft, which also abbreviates to MGD, and they did it not because they cared to sell Michelob Golden Draft at all, but because they wanted to confuse the category to allow them to boost sales of some of their other brands. So those sort of tactics do exist, but it's not really the business that we're in. Chicken or eggs? Does brand personality drive product development or vice versa? That's a really great question. It's both. I think usually what happens is product creation drives brand personality, drives product creation. I think it starts that way. I think businesses rarely start with a really, really thoughtful point of view on what their brand stands for. They start with a point of view on what they want to do in the world and why they think it matters, and that leads to the kind of product they want to create. And if they make that product and people buy that product and people start to care about that product, you can't then help but start to think of yourself through the lens of how your consumers adopted that product. Right. And then that starts to inform the way you think about your brand personality. I mean, it doesn't have to work that way, but I think that is the natural progression of things. And I think that, again, starting with why and anymore, there should be no difference between your brand's personality and the product that you make. They should be one and the same. It should be one sort of clear story. If you're brewing 100% sustainably sourced ingredient organic beer because you believe that that's the future of the industry and you're doing something good for the environment and that's where the world is moving and you want that kind of green consumer, then that inherently is your story and should be your story and therefore should inform everything about your personality. So, separating the two are difficult, but I think it usually comes from have a vision, make a product that supports that vision, learn whether your vision needs to evolve at all, and then leverage that vision to build your story.
And I was going to say, I think if anything, you start to get into problems when you start to deviate from the brand that you've created and the products that you've done in the past. Are you going to muddle what your brand is, what your culture is, and what you've defined yourself as? In that sense, you're going to possibly create confusion in the marketplace.
Absolutely, or you're going to alienate your core audience in the quest for a broader audience, which brands struggle with all the time. Or work should be done. Chicken eggs, breakfast, your product development, vice versa. The work should be done. I'm not trying to understand that. In that sense, the product's work is so legitimate. It's consumers' vision of themselves. Yeah. I mean, I think that we live as humans. This is, forgive me for getting philosophical, but everything is narrative, right? We live our lives through storytelling. We relate to everyone and everything and to ourselves through narrative. We tell ourselves stories. It's the way we think fundamentally. It's the way language works. And so if a brand or a product can help somebody tell themselves the story about themselves they want to tell, that's what making a fan is all about. And so I think, whether it's your product or your brand, your corporate social responsibility vision, your founding story, what you're fundamentally doing, and that's why I said, you may use your media dollars to target a demographic, but your advertising, your marketing idea, your brand story should be about a mindset, and that's because you're then allowing consumers to be better versions of the sort of selves they want to be by consuming or associating with your product. I feel more creative when I use Apple. I feel faster, and I'm certain I can jump higher when I wear Nike, right?
There's another question up from Bo up above. Do you have your own website team?
That's a really good question. That is a hard question to answer because we change our mind and we change our staffing on that a lot. There was a time when we had our own web design team at North, and where we managed as much of it internally as we could. What we realized was that didn't lead to the best work, because fundamentally we're strategic thinkers and creative problem solvers. We're not back-end developers. We're designers, but we're not programmers. And to be, if you want to be best in class at something technical like that, you need to invest in that. And then before you know it, you're a web development company. And that was never the vision. And so what we now do is we work with clients to understand, like I said, the business problem, to sort of strategize what the website should do, what the consumer might want from the website, how we want it to work. We will often design at least early drafts of the website, and then typically what we'll do is bring in user experience, information architecture, front-end development, back-end development, QA partners that are people we hand select, or businesses we hand select, because we know that they are best in class. And what we're able to do then is bring best in class technology solutions to what I would like to think is best in class strategic and creative solutions, and pair those things together to come back with a product. But there are also times where clients have a tech partner that they want to work with, but that tech partner doesn't have a great design or storytelling sensibility, so we'll just we'll partner well with them if that's the job to be done. But we do not have web development in-house, and that is one of those things where we definitely partner out to do the technical side of things. Mm-hmm. Total ballpark figure, total average cost for a website with the same caliber as Deschutes or Columbia. Oof, those are very different numbers. The Deschutes budget from the Columbia budget, in large part because of the complexity of the e-commerce platform of the Columbia. You can't buy beer at DeschutesBrewery.com. I believe you still can't buy beer online through the brand at all nationally.
For the most part. Only at pickup.
Yeah, right. So, to be honest with you, the Deschutes site is not particularly complicated, and to give you a ballpark figure, this is such a cop-out answer. You could do a website from anywhere between, depending on the functionality you want, from $35,000 to $350,000, and that comes down to how custom you want it to be, how deep you want it to be, how integrated you want it to be with your social media platforms, and how sort of intensive your supply chain management, distribution, and e-commerce needs to be. So a brand like Columbia, they're global, and they make probably the broadest range of outdoor product in the entire outdoor industry. So that's a super complex website. Deschutes, they can't sell the product. The most complex thing is real-time information about where the beer is available. The other stuff is fairly static, almost, is copy and imagery. I truly don't know what that site costs, but I'm going to guess it was more than 50 and less than 100 grand. What I would say is if you're looking to build a good site on a budget, don't use custom design. There are a million really great tools out there that are in the open source world that you can either figure out, or you can hire a million contractors who are experts on it. The biggest challenge we encounter, we work with brands that were sold by a web development company, a custom platform, and nobody knows how to service it, nobody knows how to change out an image, there's a typo, nobody can figure out how to get in and fix it. So, build a three-tier system. Right, yes it would. Is there a rule of thumb of how much a company should spend on marketing ads as a percentage of their budget? There have been models. I have not seen one in a long time. Because the media world is so blown up, that the media channel landscape is so changed that you could spend 50% of your revenue on a TV commercial that would be it would reach a ton of 10 million people, 3,000 of them are your actual consumer, and would be terribly inefficient, and you'd be out of money. Or you could spend a quarter of that money on Facebook, and reach a super targeted audience that's ready and willing to buy your beer. So anymore, I don't think there is a percentage. I think that also has to do with your geographic distribution. What I'll say is if you're a national brand that's trying to grow national awareness, it's going to be hard to spend, less than 5% of your total revenue on marketing and have anyone notice it. If you're a super targeted regional brand and you're going to use principally social and digital platforms to do hyper-efficient targeting, then you can be really effective. How many times have you been clicking around the internet and Facebook or anywhere and you feel like, the ads are stalking you? And that's because somebody is paid, they're not reaching 10 million people, they're reaching 10,000, but those 10,000 are the right 10,000. And while the cost per click for those 10,000 might be, a small percentage more expensive, it's money well spent because it's the right 10,000.
And they are following you because that's a thing you can do.
Yeah.
And I think I've heard anywhere from 1, 2, 3% is a really low bar up to 10%. There are table stakes. You're going to want to build a website at the beginning. So for a brewery that's just started and has no revenue, that's what's infinity percent of your revenue, right? Getting off the ground is a thing you have to do, but then once you're running, you can run pretty lean for a small regional or local brew pub.
Yeah. I'm trying to think about if there are other thoughts on how to do it efficiently. I'll come back to that if I think of something helpful. ROI prediction when answering RFPs. God, that is the $1 million question. Not sophisticated. And I will tell you, I'm in the throes of this right now for a brand. I don't know that there's a sophisticated model for projecting ROI that doesn't cost you $50,000 a month. It is, there are big brand companies out there like Nielsen or Market Share that'll do it, but they're doing it for, Fortune 50s. It's catastrophically expensive. There are a few independent, like volumetric, econometric modeling experts, PhDs that have left, academia and are now doing it on the side, but it's hard. And we confront that all the time, right? Companies, and I can understand that. If I owned a business or was making a product and I was going to spend money to market it, I want to know what's my ROI going to be. Why should I spend this money? And it is tough to do that. But it's tough to do that on a dollars. I can't tell you how much incremental money you're going to make. I can't tell you what percentage lift you're going to see in revenue in a given time in a given market. Not ROI is return on investment. So if we spend money, what's the upside going to be? It's not tough. Well, tough to predict or tough to report. So 2 answers real quick. I will say on projecting ROI is it's hard to project dollar lift. What you can know is media metrics. So we can know we're going to have 6 million impressions, 40,000 clicks, and 12,000 likes. If the video is going to be 127,000 views. Like when you buy media channels, you can buy thresholds. So let's say you're doing 15-second video pre-roll on YouTube, right? The super annoying video where you want to watch the thing you want to watch and you get some junk from a brand that we don't tend to buy that because it annoys people. But let's say you're going to do that. You can buy only for completed video views. So you negotiate, I'm going to spend X $1,000 for 25,000 video completes. So in that,
skip ad.
Right. So in that case, you know exactly what you're going to get. And as long as you believe that the work is strategically sound and creatively good, and our marketing goals are right, like we are going to drive awareness and share a voice in given market, like if you believe the goals are good, then you can identify the media metrics that are sort of suggestive of whether you're meeting your goals. ROI is very hard to predict. It's possible to report, but it's only really possible to report digitally unless you're going to spend a tremendous amount of money on third-party research companies. You can't run a TV spot, watch sales lift, and then say it happened because of the TV spot and not because we increased penetration and distribution.
All right, so we've got just about a minute left, and I see there's still some questions coming in. Jordan, I'm going to ask if you would be willing to follow up with 1 or 2 questions by email.
Sure.
Folks still send some other stuff.
Yeah, that's fine.
And send those to me since I don't believe we've shared your email just yet. And then I can bounce those his way. Really great questions. Really appreciative that Jordan was willing to donate his time to join us tonight for class for our first live session for 403. And thanks to all y'all for joining in, asking some interesting questions. And we'll follow up, and Lisa will have a live session. I'll have a live session next week. Lisa will have a live session in a couple of weeks as well. So thanks, and we'll see you all down the road.
Thank you.